My name is Brian Zakelli. I'm the town planner. I'm here with Susan Verdicchio of the Select Board and Acting Town Manager Beth Rudolph, as well as the potential applicant, Mario Cavino, with Paul Haverty representing him. So thank you to all for coming. I'm just going to have a couple of slides here, briefly going to let you know the progression of this meeting. So the agenda for today, I'm going to give a very brief.
Brian, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I don't know if others can see your slides. I just see a notice that says Brian Zakelli has, oh, there we go.
Is this?
That worked.
You see agenda? Okay,
I
good.
can see agenda, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that. You missed this slide, so nothing there.
Yep.
Thank you. So the agenda today, I'm gonna briefly talk kind of like a little bit of a snapshot of where we are with 40B, a very small introduction. And then I'm gonna pass it over to Susan Verdicchio to kind of explain why we're here in terms of this process and this applicant. Then we will turn it over to Paul Haverty and Mario Cavino to present their proposal. And then the bulk of this program this evening is really this open forum for questions and comments. So I'm just going to dive right in, and we're going to save questions and comments for the end. Like I said, most of this entire time will be really focusing on this number 4 here with this questions and comments. So a couple of just very brief mentions about 40B. So 40B is Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. What this does is it allows developers to apply for and build larger buildings or specific uses that are not allowed under zoning if there are either of these two cases. Many people are familiar with the 25% of the total units if they are deed restricted to the 80% of the area median income, meaning that you have to make, for a family of 4, so 2 adults and 2 kids, you would have to make less than $96,650. This would correspond to 80% of AMI. So the way that developers can override zoning is either if 25% are at 80%, so 25% of the units are deed restricted for people making this much, or if only 20% are at the 60% level. So that is, this specific applicant is looking to do this. 20% of the total units would be deed restricted to households who make 60% of the AMI, which would be an income limit of around $80,000. So that would be 2 units in this case out of the total of 9. So currently the town has just under 5% of its total units listed on the state subsidized housing inventory, known as the SHI. This is where 10% is actually required to receive what's called safe harbor. If we have safe harbor, we can deny 40B projects as saying that we don't need them. We have our 10%, so therefore we don't have a need for it. And these units, these numbers, several people have asking when they actually get added onto the SHI. It's at the time that the town approves the permit. So in this case, it would be the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it has to go through that Zoning Board of Appeals process. And then once it's awarded, that's when the units can get counted on the SHI. So we are actually currently under safe harbor, but not because we're at 10%. We are currently at safe harbor because we've achieved this through an increase of at least 0.5%, which in our case is 40 units. We built more than 40 units in 1 year, and we actually built more than 80 units in 2, specifically from the River Street 40B. So the River Street gave us 2 years of safe harbor. That safe harbor will expire in 9 days, March 18th, 2022. Now I'd like to pass it over to Susan Verdicchio to talk a little bit about what a friendly 40B, otherwise known as a LIP application is, and take it away, Susan.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks everybody for joining us on this snowy evening. So just to kind of pick up where Brian left off, the concept that we're looking at tonight is a smaller proposal to have an affordable project on this parcel of land. And Mr. Covino approached the town with this proposal and some drawings for it, and asked if the town would consider making this what's called a friendly 40B, or pursuing this with him in a joint petition to the state called the Local Initiative Petition, or LIP. And there is a process for pursuing one of these that the select board adopted a couple of years ago, and you can read it on the town website on the select board page. And what we're doing tonight is basically step one, which is having a short presentation to the neighbors, the people in the surrounding area, to get their comments and their input. And then taking that into account, the select board and the developer would begin to decide whether to move forward with this as a friendly 40B, and then, you know, present it to the state, to the Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD. So the main idea here is to give all of the people who are attending and live in the city to give them a chance to make some comments and make suggestions. That's basically what we're going to do now. And so we're going to turn it over to Mario Covino, who is the developer, and his counsel, Paul Haverty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Paul Haverty, Blattman, Bobrowski, Haverty, and Silverstein, representing the applicant, Mario Covino. As has already been noted, we have come to the select board seeking support for this project under the local initiative program, which is a program that's offered by DHCD. It's frequently referred to as the Friendly 40B. And what we're seeking is approval of a 9-unit rental development on the property located at 87 to 89 Cross Street. And this property is located partially in the GBD zoning district in the front, and the RG zoning district in the rear. My client proposes that 2 of the units will be restricted as affordable at the deeper affordability level that was mentioned by the town planner at the beginning of his discussion. So that means 2 out of the 9 units would be affordable units at 60% of area median income. All of the proposed units will have 3 bedrooms, and all of the units will contain the same finishes, which means that there'll be no difference in the finishes between the affordable units and the market rate units. The structures that are being proposed will generally comply with applicable setback requirements, with the exception of a necessary front setback waiver. The project will also have a minimum of 2 parking spaces per unit. And I can put up a copy of the site plan if anybody is interested in seeing that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. You should be able to share now.
Don't see a share screen option on here. Oh, here we go. I get it. Let's see. Hold on a second. Let me get the site plan open. Okay. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
That's a draft site plan showing essentially what the layout will look like. There will be needs for some tweaks to this design as the project moves forward. This is at a particularly preliminary stage, because at this point in time, we're simply providing conceptual plans, trying to get the support. And once we get the okay to move forward, we'll do a higher level, still concept plan before we would ever file anything with the zoning board of appeals. So the way that Chapter 40B works an applicant is required to get a project eligibility letter from a qualifying subsidizing agency before it's allowed to file a comprehensive permit application with the Board of Appeals. There are 4 qualifying subsidizing agencies. There's DHCD, which has a number of different programs, and the LIP program is one of their programs. There is Mass Housing, which is sort of the most frequently used subsidizing agency. There's also Mass Housing Partnership, which is a separate entity from Mass Housing. And then there's also Mass Development. So any one of those 4 different groups could issue a project eligibility letter. But what my client has chosen to do is move forward through the LIP process to try to get the town to actually support this and move forward with it in a joint application to DHCD. So the local support that's involved in a LIP application gives the town a lot more input and a lot more control over the process than when an applicant just goes to one of the other subsidizing agencies and seeks a project eligibility letter. And I'll give you a very strong indication of why that makes a difference here. This application is being proposed as a 9-unit rental development. And the town gets to count 100% of the units on its subsidized housing inventory, despite the fact that only 2 of the 9 units are being proposed as affordable units. If the applicant were to go to Mass Housing or one of the other subsidizing agencies, it probably would move forward on a home ownership project instead of a rental development, which would require 3 of the units be affordable at 80% of area median income. And you would only get to count the actual 3 affordable units rather than the total of 9 units. And the reason that we would be going forward with the rental development under the LIP is because we understand that it's a significant benefit to the town to be able to count all of the units. And there's also a benefit in creating rental units, and there's a benefit in creating them at the greater level of affordability that's being proposed. So all of that sort of works in and winds up being beneficial to the town and gives you a better ability to control the process than if we simply went for the traditional Mass Housing style eligibility letter in which you would be allowed to provide comments to Mass Housing, but your support is not a requirement for that process. So that really sort of sets the stage as to what we're proposing and sort of gives some background on how the process works. We're happy to answer any questions that anybody
Thanks. Thanks so much for that. So I think the way we're gonna do this is that if you could just use the either raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen or the Q&A function. So I'll be kind of directing traffic here in terms of for the applicant or for Attorney Haverty or for the select board or for the acting town manager. So I'm gonna stop sharing. So
I'd say it's good that you are, because I can never seem to figure out how to stop sharing.
So here we are. So I see that there are about 12 or so people in the audience, and I am not seeing any hands raised. If anyone, now is really the time to kind of voice your concerns about the project in general, or specifically, or have any questions about anything for the select board. Now kind of would be the time to do that. And I'm really not seeing a lot of action, which is rare, but not necessarily bad.
I think Anthea Brady has her hand raised.
Yeah, I see one.
Oh, there, and here it comes.
There's another one. Yep.
All right, so we'll start with Anthea, and then we'll go to Eileen. Anthea, why don't you unmute yourself and let us know what you'd like to say.
Thank you. And I apologize if I missed this earlier. I was turning late from another meeting. For that that area, which is right by the intersection of Lower Forest and Cross and the bike path and Davidson Park and the soccer stadium. Are there plans to be studying that intersection and traffic because of the flow of kids through there, flow of pedestrians using the bike path and getting through also to the businesses up on Cross Street?
Paul, did you want to take that in terms of when that type of study would be done during the process?
I would be happy to, except for I really couldn't hear the question. If someone could
Sure. So Anthea was asking, was basically saying that there's a lot of pedestrian and vehicular activity around this intersection. At what point in time would there be some type of a traffic study related to pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular safety around this project?
So traffic study would be done as part of the submittal of the comprehensive permit application to the Board of Appeals. And so that's generally the time that that sort of study gets done.
Anthea, did you have a follow-up question?
No, that's helpful. I think it's just that intersection is already a big concern, so additional traffic coming through makes the neighborhood a little wary.
Thank you for that. Eileen, you are next. Let me elevate you here.
Just trying to figure out how to unmute. I'm not crazy about the idea. I live right behind the property in question. And I feel the schools are already way over capacity, especially in the Lynch and the Morocco area. And I don't want 9 units behind me. And there's a lot of traffic, like the woman was saying ahead of me. So
are there any questions, or we will be logging all of these comments into an eventual document. So if there isn't a question, that's perfectly fine. But the floor is yours if you have any further questions.
Not really. I just have concerns about it being built and about the town overbuilding, especially in the low ends, not in the high ends. Everything seems to be done down in the lower ends of the town and not in the higher ends. And I feel we're getting very congested. Forest Street's already a nightmare. Cross Street's very busy as well. And, I don't really have any questions because it doesn't really make a difference anyway, because you're going to do what you want to do anyhow. So.
Eileen, can I ask what you mean by low end and high end? Are you talking about the price of the housing units or like a physical location?
The physical locations. There's no building being done anywhere else besides the Lynch school system and the Morocco school system when it comes to these multi buildings. There's houses being built all over the town, I get that. But one building being torn down and then having 9 units, it's a lot.
Okay, I understand.
And then, they're all rentals too. So that means people are going to be coming in and out. At least if they were townhouses, people would be buying them and then they would be staying there a good amount of time. So not to mention what kind of noise could be coming out of there as well too.
Yeah, I understand.
So that's just how I feel.
Thank you for that. I don't know if there would be a response from the applicant. Otherwise, I was going to kind of go into there's a couple of questions in the Q&A that seem like they will be very quick. Unless Paul or Mario had a response to Eileen's concerns, I think we would move on to the question and answer.
I just move on.
Okay. I agree.
Unless Mario, unless you want to respond.
I just, it's, I don't understand the question about people living there, whether it's an apartment or a condo. It's still somebody's home. but that's all.
Okay, thank you. So there was a question of, has a traffic study been done? I believe that's already been answered, that a traffic study has not been performed. It will be at the time of whether or not this will move forward as a friendly 40B or not. The next question in the Q&A is a simple one. Mr. Covino, how long have you owned the property?
Oh, I think approximately 7 years, 8 years.
Okay. As of now, those are all of the questions that are in the Q&A box. And I am not seeing any other hands, but this is, oh, great. John Serbier, we'll elevate you here. John Serbier, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Okay, am I unmuted?
You are, we can hear you.
Okay, I confess I'm not completely up to date on the, with my Chapter 40B homework. I'm chair of Winchester's Housing Partnership Board. We would be a partner in any application of a 40B that was submitted. I have two questions. That Paul Haverty said that mass housing likely would require a mass housing application of 40B likely would require home ownership rather than rental. The two existing 40B properties are projects in Winchester, one on River Street and one on Cambridge Street, were both processed through mass housing. They're both rental projects. What is your rationale for saying they would require that this be a home ownership project?
Thank you. I did not say that mass housing would require it to be a home ownership project. What I said was if we were required to go in that route, that we would likely go forward as a home ownership, because a home ownership development on this scale is actually more profitable than the rental development would be. However, because we wanted to move forward, in a cooperative manner with the town and do this under the local initiative process, we have proposed it as a rental, even though it is less financially remunerative.
Okay, I was trying to understand.
Yeah, no.
The rationale. The other statement that you made was that, if I understood it correctly, DHCD would only require 2 affordable units, but that mass housing would require 3 affordable units. So
if it's home ownership,
one is rounded up.
So the provision that allows you to do 20% affordable and still have them count is applicable only to rental developments. The home ownership developments, you have to do 25%.
Okay, so you're proposing this as a 60% AMI eligible development.
Yeah, rental development.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, there's another question in the Q&A. Beth, I might put you on the spot here. This is saying, when the traffic study is done, how will it take into account the River Street project traffic that will be in this area as well? So a condition that's not existing yet, but it's known to be there. So how would any traffic study done at this location be able to incorporate a not yet realized building?
Yeah, so I don't want to answer for the applicant. What we typically see, I'm putting on my town engineer hat for the moment, is first, if this was submitted to the town prior to the completion of the River Street 40B project, they would have to make some estimates about what that traffic impact would be. It typically includes some sort of growth rate and knowing what the size of that development is, and there being a traffic study having been done for the River Street project, I assume that the applicant's traffic engineer could use that information to help augment their own traffic study. Obviously, it's possible that this project could take longer and that the River Street project would be complete and occupied by the time they are ready to go, and then their traffic counts would just, include whatever that volume of traffic was generated. So, thank you.
Thank you. I believe that was very thoroughly answered. Well, it's.
I was gonna, Brian,
Please, yes, please.
If you don't mind, I could ask a couple of questions. Because Mr. Covino came to the select board table and talked to us about this. And one of the questions that came up at that time was, about how this is a very preliminary drawing and you can't really tell a lot from it. So I'm just wondering what the proposed, or what height you're thinking about for the buildings, and if you were thinking about any landscaping or trees at all.
I'm going to try to soften the property as best I can by doing a lot of plantings in the front and buffering from neighbors as well. The height, I believe, is about it's 2.5 stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's approximately 35 feet tall. It's not much taller than what's existing there. I do believe that, I do have off-street parking everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it is safe for people to pull in and pull out. There won't be parking on the street. So everybody has adequate parking on the property. But I do tend to, really, soften it and landscape it heavily, not putting small plant material down. I'd use a lot larger specimen plants and, beautify it as best I could.
The other thing was the existing building is set way back from the street, and this would have to come closer to the street. But you're saying that, that area would be planted. It wouldn't be just like grass.
Right. It's about, it'll be 25 feet off the stone wall that's existing there now, I believe, 20 feet. And, I would definitely soften that with plant material, for the people that are living inside these homes, as well as the neighbors.
Okay. And I think this has hit the social media in town. And one of the questions that came up in that discussion was whether this house was historic. Has it been ruled yes or no on historic?
It isn't a historic house. It was, and I'm told it was, and I went through the process with the Historic Commission already to remove the home. It's in tough shape. It's an old home, and it's in a lot of disrepair.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add a little bit of color to that, so a demo delay hearing was occurred years ago. The demo delay year is up. So the applicant has the ability to demolish the property at this time.
Thanks, Brian. I guess the other thought that comes to me is, would you consider looking into making this, a sustainable design, maybe all electric heat and hot water, insulated or super insulation, those types of features.
Yes,
is that something you would consider?
In my past, when I do build a property or renovate a property, I do go as green as I can. I do use a good insulation. I use radiant heat, which is extremely efficient. I put efficient boilers in. So I do install these things into my homes and apartments when I do them. I want this place to look like it grew there. I'm looking for something that's oversized or out of place or look awful. I want it to look like it melds with the neighborhood, and so I feel I can achieve that pretty easily.
I'm just wondering if anybody, any of the residents have any questions along those lines.
So right,
Anyone?
yeah, there's some questions have started, but John Serbier had one more question.
Oh.
I was saying what provisions will be included for persons with disabilities. So I'm guessing, John, you mean in not just the units that are deed restricted affordable, but all of the units? Or maybe we'll go on to another question. Wow.
I mean, I think we can presume that that question is asking about all of the units. And generally the way they're designed is that they're handicap adaptable. So that if somebody is coming in that wants to rent one of the units, they can be converted to address any access issues that they may have.
So, I mean, if it's 2.5 stories, how would a person with limited mobility be able to get to the second and third floors?
That seems like a very legitimate question.
No, you could put, stairway lifts in if need be. And add something to that effect if somebody's disabled. There is a bedroom on the first floor, which will be handicap accessible, and a bathroom on the first floor as well. But that's something we can look into.
I'm just going to keep going here with the question and answer function. I think this one is for Paul. So this is from Shannon Callahan. It says, I believe with the River Street property that there was a small sum of money that would be given to the town and earmarked for the neighborhood to plant trees along Cross Street. Will other similar concessions be made for this property? So I think it's talking about during the permitting phase, but if you wanted Paul to talk about some, mitigating conditions that typically you might see on projects like this, whatever you can add to that.
Well, I mean, so I have not talked with my client about anything of that nature, but that certainly seems like a reasonable request and something that could be provided. It's not unusual for municipalities to request mitigation of certain items, and landscaping is certainly one of the major ones. Obviously, there'll be costs associated with tie-ins to water and sewer. I don't think that this is of a scale that would require any sort of upgrades. So that's sort of not the type of thing you would see associated with a project of this scale that you might see associated with a project of a much larger scale. But certainly, throughout the process, we'll be open to mitigation suggestions.
Thanks, Paul. We'll take one more question related to what you just talked about, and then I'm going to call on Diane Bryan. The question is, has there been any studies done, or will there be studies done regarding the water table in the area? With 9 units going in there, there will be more wastewater, and there will be flooding issues. So they're talking about two very different issues here. One is wastewater, which you kind of just mentioned, and the other is potential flooding. So what types of studies or infiltration would you potentially be doing on this site?
So there would certainly be infiltration on the site. There'll be requirements to comply with the DEP stormwater management policy. So that will obviously be met. I don't think wastewater would have any impact on the water table in the area. It's going to go to municipal wastewater treatment facility. So that's not going to be a concern.
Yep.
Just add a little bit to that if you want, Brian.
Please.
So the town of Winchester has our own stormwater regulations, which are more stringent than the DEP requirements. So you'll be required to meet those requirements. And also with respect to flooding, the site is not in the 100-year floodplain, although there are obviously areas very close to it that do flood on Cross Street and Forest Street. But this site itself is elevated outside of the 100-year floodplain.
Thanks for that, Beth. Well, now I'm going to let Diane Brine. The floor is yours for any questions or comments.
Okay, just a comment. The project seems to be quite dense for the neighborhood. 9 units seems to be very dense. And it seems to be, that whole area seems to be very congested currently as it is. So I'm just throwing that out, that 9 units seems to be a little bit too much for that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Stephen Hanley, how long a process would you expect this to take? I recognize the permitting timeline may be unknown, but once approved, how long would it take from demo to finished units? So I believe this is for the applicant. I will just say it at the beginning here, typically 40B processes, the permitting takes 6 months. So, but this question is after that permitting, and once approved, how long would it take to actually get finished units? Paul.
So I'll let Mario handle the answer with regards to the construction time.
I would probably.
On the permitting side, it's actually a little bit longer than 6 months, because you have to throw in the project eligibility process with subsidizing agency, which we've sort of commenced as part of this process, but then there's an application that has to be filed with DHCD. They need to review it. They come out and they'll do a site visit. So that's probably 3 months. And then after a permit is issued, you then have to actually prepare final plans. You've got to go back to the subsidizing agency, get final approval, execute all of your regulatory documents. And that is typically another 3 months. So on the permitting side, it's probably a year. And then Mario, you can give it on the construction side.
I would roughly, I'd say, 24 months. Inside 24 months, I'd say, or inside of that.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I was talking about the ZBA process that is typically 6 months, but with the other, the full, maybe, yeah, the full timeline is certainly there. What comprehensive traffic mitigation plans have been put in place for an already heavily trafficked area? 9 units would entail at least 18 vehicles near the intersection of a greenway path, preschool, and many children's recreation centers, with absolutely no traffic lights currently in place in the area around Cross and Forest. So this is asking about what comprehensive plans have been put in place for this specific area already. I think this question might be for select board or manager.
I know there was a traffic study for River Street, but I don't know if there's and there was a corridor study, which is what Cross Street is that's correct, right? We did one for.
We did do a corridor study maybe 3 years ago or so.
Mm-hmm.
There really hasn't been anything implemented because Eversource is in the process of completing the construction on the 345 kV line, which will disrupt the streetscape and traffic patterns and everything on Cross Street.
Mm-hmm.
I will just mention, so we did say previously, I'm not sure if the person who asked the question heard this, but they will be required to do a traffic study as part of the comprehensive permitting process that would go through the ZBA. And the other thing I would just mention more globally, as the town is just about to undertake a transportation master plan, where we're looking to seek input from residents throughout town about areas where you have concerns about either traffic, vehicular speeds, volumes, and also pedestrian safety and bike safety. So I would encourage anybody who's concerned about existing traffic in their neighborhood to participate as part of that process. We'll be rolling out some general kind of public information, public comment sessions over the next few months to gather input from folks and have our traffic engineer evaluate any concerns that people have. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say we're certainly aware of Cross Street being a cut-through area, and I live very close to it as well. So duly noted, and it's you know, evolving, so it would make sense to have another study.
Thanks. One more question here. It says, are there any current concerns in this area for flooding? So again, that might be Beth.
Yeah, so I think I just mentioned this site in particular, although it is adjacent to areas that flood, is not currently in 100-year floodplain.
Thanks for that.
And, you know, I would add that, you know, as Beth mentioned, our stormwater regulations, if we're thinking about, you know, runoff from this site after it's all built, we do have some fairly stringent stormwater regulations, regulations for the design of stormwater improvements in new buildings. So that's in place as well.
Thanks for that, Susan. Well, Shannon Callahan, whenever you are ready, you should be able to unmute.
Hi. Oh, sorry. I don't know. Give me one second. Sorry. I just wanted to circle back to the traffic, and I know Beth, I've talked to you about it before, and I guess my only concern is like we're acknowledging here, like, yeah, this is a highly traveled area. Yes, there's a lot of traffic. Yep, it's a corridor. We know it's a cut through, and now we're going to be adding. To me, it's not so much of it. It's not so much the cars that we're adding; it's the people. And what's the safety of the people that are moving in? So we're saying, oh, this is like a dense project, say 4 people per unit. You know, we're looking at like 30 people. And what are we doing in terms of traffic to protect the people that are walking to the bike path, that are going to Davidson Park? Like, I think that part of this site being identified as optimal was the proximity to the bike path, to Morocco, to some of the family-oriented businesses on Cross Street. And I'm a little weary of hearing like, oh, we know about the traffic, and I understand there's competing priorities. I understand most of the town is a cut through, right? So it's not that I think like, oh, poor us, you know, over in this area. But at the same time, if people have been raising this issue over and over and over, and now we're adding more people under the guise like, this is such a great area, it is walkable. What are we doing? What's the mitigation there? And like, what are actionable steps instead of like, yeah, we got it. And I know you can't make promises, but I think it really is like paramount that these issues are addressed. So thank you.
Yeah, unsure, I guess, who to give that to, only because some type of traffic mitigation or traffic calming, which is, I think, really mainly what you're talking about. What types of traffic calming would occur as part of this development, and that it'll have to be studied. But I don't know if Paul or anyone else wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, so that is the sort of thing that is typically part of a traffic study. That is done by a professional traffic engineer. They will have suggestions of ways to address existing issues and concerns. They'll review how this project, you know, will or will not exacerbate any existing issues. And presuming we move forward and we file a comprehensive permit application with the Board of Appeals, the board would have the ability to require the applicant to fund a 53G account so that they could retain their own traffic engineer to peer review the traffic study that the applicant's engineer does. So this is something that will be the subject of significant review and a large part, I'm sure, of the process that occurs before the Zoning Board of Appeals when we get to that point.
Thanks for that, Paul. Any further on that question or otherwise? Right now the Q&A is empty. I have in the past gotten anonymous questions, and meaning that it's anonymous attendee. So just to let people know that we typically don't answer those. If you're in a public meeting, you do need to represent yourself and say who you are. So outside of that, I am still taking questions through the raise your hand function and also the Q&A until we've exhausted that. So we might be there, but I certainly don't want to extinguish anyone's light before they're ready. So maybe with that, I will actually kind of very quickly show the process of where we are right now in terms of what a friendly 40B is, and maybe that will generate some more questions as we wrap up. Okay. So this is a select board policy that, as Ms. Verdicchio said, was up online on the select board page. This has been reviewed by the Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as voted on by the select board as of January of 21. And here we are at step one, which is public meeting number 1, which is a high-level conceptual design that's going to be shared with the public to determine the willingness of the neighborhood to move forward with such a friendly 40B. After that, there would be then a call set up with DHCD and to determine expectations for the process. Contribution and timelines are discussed here. After that initial call, we would, excuse me. After that initial call, we will then, just like the applicant just said, we would use 53G, meaning that the town would hire its own design review consultant or traffic consultant or whatever consultant we feel that are necessary to get this job done. And then we would, who would pay for that is not the residents of Winchester, it's the applicant. So we pick the town picks the consultant as an outside consultant, but it is paid by the applicant. After those consultants are hired, then we actually we would try to potentially file the actual application. But a friendly 40B is another word of saying a joint venture. So this would be a joint venture if the select board agrees to do it between the town and this applicant. It's almost done here. So 2 through 7 is just showing what's needed for the application. After we do that application, we would have another public meeting before we do the final application submittal. So we would kind of have regular check-ins with the town throughout the process. If it then, after that, goes to what's called a comprehensive permit application, this means it's in front of the ZBA. If it does pass the ZBA, then the final steps are this regulatory agreement. The regulatory agreement is signed between DHCD and the municipality and the developer. And it's really to memorialize all the rights and responsibilities of all the parties. It's almost like an MOU, but much more stringent. So I'll stop there. That was a lot of information about the process and where we're at and where we're potentially going. I see that has Kristen Albertson says, you maybe have addressed this already, but would this construction remove any of the trees that are currently on the property? The immediate neighborhood has recently suffered the loss of 6 large trees on town property without any replanting efforts. Please explain attempts to mitigate tree loss on the property. So I think this is for Paul or Mario. Are there any plans under the current scheme to get rid of any trees or mature trees, as it seems to be the concern?
Yes, there are 2 trees in the front that'll come down. They're the top crown of the blue spruce trees are dying, so they have to be removed. There's a big silver maple in the back of the property on the right-hand side is going to be removed. But there'll be a lot more trees being planted on the property. But there are three trees right now that are coming down.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Do you have a follow-up with that? Okay, we'll have, looks like we're still going here. Good. A question from Angel Richmond. Richmond, will there be land in the back for families to hang out, or will the building go all the way to the end of the lot? So we could bring up that site plan again, which might show that a little bit easier. I can actually get that up pretty quick. Hold on, I'll get it. So Paul or Mario, will there be any, I guess, play space or green space on the property for these 9 families?
There's each one of these will have a back deck area, a patio area, as well as there'll be some green space. There's a 15 by 15 foot green space in the back corner, left-hand corner. And then there's also green space in the, up front there where your hand is now. So there'll be, but each unit will have its own patio area as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Mario. Thank you for explaining the friendly 40B process. Perhaps I missed it, but can you explain how this 9-unit construction is part of the larger plan to meet the town's state mandated requirements, which are much greater than simply 9 units? Susan, I could give it to you, or you could pass it to somebody else, but why don't you have a go?
Yep. Well, the housing production plan that the select board put together a couple of years ago with a lot of public input is directed at the plan to have smaller buildings with affordable units distributed around town in different locations. What we've seen proposed, this was in like 2016, 2017 era, were a couple of very large buildings with like 300 units in one place. One was on proposed for Holton Street, one was proposed for off of Forest Street, and that would be really concentrated in one spot with a lot of cars, a lot of people, and potentially an enrollment burst for the public schools in one district, one elementary school district. And so what we're attempting to do with projects like this one is to have, smaller, fewer units, but distributed around town. That's the overall plan, to encourage these, yes, denser than a one-family house or the duplex that's there now, but smaller than 300 units. That's the overall plan. And I don't know if Beth has anything to add to that.
No, I think that covered it. Thanks, Susan.
Okay. I'm not seeing anyone with their hand up, or the Q&A function has gone a little silent. We had mentioned before that, or in the previous slide, that March 11th, which is this Friday at 4 o'clock, is going to be this it's the deadline, I guess, for this first round of comments about initial takes on the property that the select board will be using to kind of help determine direction, or at least initial concerns with the property or development. So I will get up. So I think, so all comments at the moment are going to the town manager. And I'm just going to get this slide up really quick so that people can see it. So thank you for your time. we're going to be then now directing any further comments in writing or questions to town manager at winchester.us by this Friday at 4 o'clock. Again, this is this initial feedback step. If you remember going through this process, the document that I went through, there's going to be a number of public meetings and times for people to give their feedback on any concerns or questions they have regarding this project. I guess with that, I might give it back to Susan for a quick closing, unless there are any. I mean, we had given potentially 90 minutes for this, but it doesn't. It looks like the questions have slowed to a halt. So, Susan, if you wanted to kind of close us out, I think that'd be great.
Yep, sure. I wanted to thank all of the people who have participated and who are listening in. And I recognize that this is kind of the first step, and there's not a lot to look at and make suggestions or ask questions about. There will be more opportunities as the development progresses. And thank you for what you've raised tonight, and we will take that into consideration. Of course, we are aware that the traffic is already what it is, and pedestrian safety is not what it should be, perhaps. So we are gonna, we're aware that this project will add to the situation, and so that's probably at the top of the list right now. But you know, please stay tuned. And I also wanted to thank Mr. Covino and Mr. Haverty for being with us and answering questions and being open-minded and for listening to all of our thoughts. And thanks to Beth and to Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.